I bought you these for the coronavirus. Hey guys, what's going on? So apparently that's how you get demonetized, by mentioning the coronavirus within the first few seconds of a video. So unlucky for this one, but you know, that's just how it goes. This is quarantine day. I've forgotten. It's been so long since I've been outside. No, I've been outside for the last few days. It's nothing too tragic, but the gyms and everything have closed. Restaurants have closed. You have to just order off Uber Eats or the Chipotle app, which is what we've been doing, free delivery, by the way. Not sponsored, but you know, Chipotle, if you ever want to sponsor somebody or the house, hit us up. So today I thought I'd get into the start of me casting, just like the origin story, if you will. It really all begins back in university. I thought I'd just dive right in. I was doing a computer programming degree, specializing in games. It was called Games Technology, Games Tech? Yeah, Games Tech. And there were two parts to the course. So it was the programming side, and then you had the art side. In year one, for some reason, they made us do both just to make sure you knew what you were getting into, kind of thing. I think it was for the people that were on the fence. Although if you're good at art, you're probably going to do art, and you knew going into university you wanted to do that kind of thing. If you're good at programming, etc., etc. Obviously, I chose the programming route. I've been programming, I don't know, stupid little command prompt story games for a long time, up until university. I did that all throughout college, and me and my best mate back from the UK, we used to do loads of stupid little programs we used to find and create. And I honestly just followed him when it came to a career choice, I guess. Apologies, I completely forgot. I get quite parched during these videos. I followed him mainly with choosing a career because I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. I originally wanted to do marine biology, and I still have a great interest in fish and the ocean and everything like that, but I'm not entirely sure what turned me off the idea. I don't know. I think it was something to do with how competitive it was. Although now looking at it, programming is even more competitive than marine biologists, although I'm not entirely sure. I could be completely wrong. I don't know. I haven't looked into that field in a long, long time because nothing really led me down that path. And it's definitely something you have to specialize in when you go to university. So anyway, I ended up doing programming in university, and it got to my second year, and we had to make a choice whether we wanted to do a placement year or go straight into our third year. The majority of people take a placement year. The very small amount of people on our course that were pretty good at programming or art ended up getting a placement at an already established games company, whether that's, you know, you just name any of them, like Jagex, for example. I know a few people went there. That's what my best mate ended up doing. He worked at Jagex for about, I want to say 10 months or something on his placement year. I ended up setting up my own company with a few other friends in my year. It failed quite miserably. The scope of our game was humongous comparatively to what we could actually produce. It was supposed to be a XCOM style game that it was basically Payday X XCOM. So bank heist game that was in the style of XCOM. So you'd move around the map using the tiles kind of thing, and you'd have to sneak past guards and such and such and such. It was pretty cool. I actually really enjoyed my time on it. However, towards the end of the year, towards halfway through that year, when we realized how stupidly ambitious that was, I really started to actually detest programming, funnily enough. So I got into my third year, and I thought, you know, maybe it's just a frustrating year to be in and just have your project fail, and maybe that's what kind of turned me off programming as a whole. But no, it wasn't. It was just the ultra competitiveness of the industry, what we get told on a daily basis of how competitive it was and how crazy it was in terms of overtime and just everything else and crunch. And you hear all the stories nowadays of, I think, well, not so recently, but Red Dead Redemption, the Rockstar employees working like 100-hour weeks and whatnot. it gets real. All my friends from university, or at least the ones I've kept in contact with, they are in the games industry at this point, or in somewhere like IBM. And not so much IBM, but the games development ones, they have not horror stories, but they get worked to the bone. It is crazy how much stress they're under. And I knew I wasn't a good programmer, or at least not as good as they were. So it would have been so hard, so tough to actually find a job. So I decided, and obviously not having the passion for it as well. That was obviously the main thing. If I had a passion for it, I'll be doing it. And that's what I was kind of tell myself. If I have the passion for it and I want to do it, then I'd be doing it. If I don't and I'm not doing it and I dread doing it, then it's probably not something I want to actually pursue. So it got around to my last year when I was doing my dissertation, which is, funnily enough, actually on esports. It was the comparison between North American and Korean League of Legends teams when it comes to practice and basically why the Korean teams were better than North American teams at that time. It was a pretty interesting dissertation. I almost got a first for it. I got 2-1 in the end, a few points off the first, which was kind of nice. But apart from that, I didn't really want to do anything else. I didn't want to program. I didn't want to design games. I didn't want to do anything like that. We had a second final year project as well, which turned into a little Pi, a Raspberry Pi. If anybody's seen those before, we built an arcade machine basically on a Raspberry Pi, and we built a game that was supposed to be put in an arcade cabinet. It was pretty cool. The game, I've still got it somewhere. I've still got the music files somewhere on my hard drive, actually here in LA, funnily enough. So that's always fun to kind of go listen to some of the soundtracks and stuff that we didn't produce, but we got for free off of freesounds.org and all those various websites that give you sound effects and stuff for free. And listening to those tracks, and I can just picture all the gameplay in my head, and we have recorded gameplay as well, because we had to show that off in a PowerPoint presentation. And it is a lot of nostalgia, I'll put it that way. But at that time, because I didn't really want to do programming or follow up with anything to do with the games industry, I needed to find something else. And I was watching a ton of esports at the time, League of Legends specifically. This is before Overwatch came out as well. And I was like, damn, I found myself listening more to the casters than I was looking at the gameplay, which sounds kind of strange, but I sometimes just wasn't even interested in the game itself. That could have been League, that could have been like a boring match in League of Legends, like a Jin Air Green Wings game back in the day, which lasted like 60 plus minutes, or it could be just a random esport or like CS, for example. And I do really like watching CS till this very day, but I just like listening to the people speak and how they spoke and what they spoke about, etc. And it was really Monty and Doa that got me into casting originally, mostly through the Faker versus Ryu Z clip. Doa was like, what was that? Like, that specifically like tipped me over the edge and was like, yeah, okay, I want to try and pursue this. This sounds really cool. And basically I want to do that. I want to scream about players doing cool shit. And I ended up sending out a ton of emails and messages and stuff on Twitter to these small like League of Legends tournaments that were running every single week. And I did get a reply back from one eventually. This place called Esports Wall, and I don't believe it's still running now. It could be, but I ended up casting for them for it must have been a year, like a good year. Obviously, this is free. This is not like paid work or anything. I'm doing it in my bedroom with like really shitty webcams and a really shit mic. I was doing on my headset mic as well at that point, my Astra A40s, which I still have while they're back in the UK now. And then the sound quality sucked. Like, it really sucked. But it was still manageable. And you could still listen to the broadcast, you know. And I still have some of those old recordings, like really old ones, because I used to locally record it and stream it. Or rip it from YouTube. Rip it from Twitch. I can't remember what exactly I did. But I still have some of those recordings on YouTube. They're privated now, so no one can find them. But they are still there. They do still exist. And me coming home on a Saturday evening, because I went to uni 5 days a week, and then on the weekends I'd go to work because I needed to pay for my accommodation, because student loans didn't exactly cover it very well, and I was a pretty poor student basically. So I had to work on the weekends, and I had that part-time job, in fact, since I was like 16 up until the age of 21, 22. And coming home on the weekends after like a 9 till 6 on a Saturday, which is exhausting, 9 till 6, and it being an extremely busy time of the week for selling video games, which is what I did. I used to work in Game Station or Game as they took over. So it's pretty exhausting. Then coming home and then having maybe an hour or so ish, because it took me almost an hour to commute from my work to back to my uni house. So I'd have about maybe 30 minutes to an hour to get ready before we were supposed to go live. And it was all run off my PC, of course. I had to be like the producer, as it were. So I got fairly familiar with OBS very quickly, adding different scenes and then using the F keys to hotkey between the three scenes, the, intro screen and the game screen itself. Oh, no, 4 screens because it was pick ban. So it was, the intro screen, which I probably still have somewhere, the original ones. The pick ban, the in-game, and then the thanks for watching screen. And then at one point as well, we also did a pre-show, me and my co-caster at the time called Ben. We did a pre-show to that as well. So we'd sit for an hour before that. This was after I gave up my part-time job because I just couldn't handle having to do 2 final year projects. And I was like, I just need to focus on my education. So I gave the job up. And so I had a little bit more time on the weekends and whatnot to do casting. So we ended up doing a pre-show for an hour, and then we'd go live and then cast like 3 hours of games or whatever. We'd basically just run through a bracket. It'll be a double elim or single elim bracket. I can't exactly remember. Potentially only single elim. I don't know. We got quite familiar with a lot of the players actually as well, which was kind of cool because you end up casting the same players almost every single week and returning teams, which was really sweet. And it built many storylines, and that's one of the cool things I'm really thankful for originally back then, was the fact that a lot of these players were returning, and some of them would change up some of their players every now and then to other random solo queue players, and you'd actually build a narrative throughout the weeks of casting. And then they'd win riot points. They'd win the Triumphant Rise skin, I believe it was. I can't remember exactly the skin that you got, but if you won a tournament, Riot would give out riot points and then give out the skin. I think it's Triumphant Rise. Can't remember. But yeah, I ended up casting them for an absolute age. Didn't really know where I was going to go with it at all. I didn't know how to do anything. Like, I didn't know how to break into other games, or because I wanted to focus on League of Legends at the time. That really wasn't something that I wanted to do anyway. But, break into other games and just other orgs and whatnot. And all I did was just send out a bunch of emails for as much as I could find. There was another, not competing organization at that time, but there was another thing called Compete League, which I ended up trying to cast as well. Didn't really go well. It wasn't successful at all. Like, I didn't end up getting any work from them, I don't think. Maybe 1 or 2 gigs, but like nothing. And again, this is all unpaid as well, obviously, but because when you start out, you're not going to get paid for a long time. Although know your worth, and that is a completely different conversation. I don't really want to bring up that now, but you will work for free for a long time. Well, not a long time, but, a certain amount of time before you end up getting paid for gigs. Anyway, like I said, that's another topic. But, and I ended up messaging like a bunch of people as well. Every caster in the UK, I ended up messaging because that's how you build connections and like build relationships and just get other gigs at the end of the day, being friendly and just making sure they are aware of you as well, which is also quite a big one. Because if you're not doing anything, if you're just casting, no one's going to be watching those games. So you've got to make sure people are actually aware that you exist, which is, I think, quite underrated with new casters nowadays. Just going, coming from where some people are starting off now. If no one knows you exist, then, it's kind of hard to pivot and shoot off in other directions. So, make yourself aware, make other people aware of you, and make other people help you as well, which is another thing. Ask for advice. Ask for a lot of advice, because you're going to be really bad when you start out, and there's going to be a lot of obvious stuff that you think you're doing right but you're actually doing wrong, or casting, a lot of it is subjective in some respects, but there are definitely some things people do wrong that are objectively wrong, like shouting. It's not shouting at all. You shouldn't be shouting ever. Raising your voice is a better term for it. You don't shout. Otherwise, you just will damage your voice, and it doesn't sound very good at all. You should be raising your voice, not shouting. That's okay. There's a tip for you, real fast. But I ended up messaging a ton of people, and some of those people ended up getting back to me, which I'm super thankful for. In fact, Captain Flowers, who I met the other day at a bar when me and Bram were out, and I was like, I remember his like rise to fame, as it were, the demon casting, the Baron call, and I talked about that with him. And because at that time, I was also in the same kind of position he was. I was casting University League of Legends games, but he was doing like the North American side. I was doing the UK side, which I was going to get onto in a second, but now just kind of skipped ahead. And we were kind of talking about how people rise up through casting and just how people get noticed. And that was obviously one of the things that got him noticed. And what he had to do for casting, because of course, everybody's got their own kind of janky setup to begin with. I mean, mine was on my now dead PC back in the UK, which I don't use, and I've got a brand new one now, of course, but that barely ran like OBS and League at the same time. You'd have a few frame drops here and there. And yeah, he was explaining to me about his old setup as well. And at that time too, I had to convince my parents that this was something that I really wanted to pursue. So I told them I'd try this thing for a year. And if it didn't work out, then I'd do something else. And I'd probably get a QA job at a game studio, which my friends at that point anyway had already been working there for a little while. So I could kind of wiggle my way in that way, because it always does help to know someone on the inside, regardless of what people tell you. People can recommend you, and that can go a long way. So that's what I probably would have done. Or go taught English in Korea, which is still a goal of mine at one point. I do want to fulfill that. Yeah, so kind of went off on a massive tangent, but the origin of this story is I ended up contacting some people at the Newell, which is the National University Esports League. And I ended up getting a casting position there, which is pretty sick. And funnily enough, Trid was actually the person that like interviewed me for the position. So basically we went through a VOD of mine and we talked about just improvement. That's about it. There's not really much else there to say. We talked about what I should and shouldn't be doing in casting. And at that point, he definitely was a senior caster to me. We're on basically the same level at this point. But, you know, it's funny how those things kind of work out, you know. And at that point, Trib was doing a lot of League of Legends gigs. And he introduced me, or like the Newell in general, introduced me to some people like Dez. And apologies for the noise there. It introduced me to people like Dez and he was called Sona, Aaron, but now he's called Medic, who's casting the LEC currently. Manic Scoundrel, one of probably my longest term casting partner that I've had, even to this very day. So that was very helpful, me being brought onto the Newell, because I knew at that point basically the top rung of the casting in the UK, at least for League of Legends. It was Xscoundrel and it was Aaron. Like, those were the two people in the UK that were doing the most League of Legends work. Were doing UK Masters and ESL, which I ended up taking over from Aaron because he ended up getting LCS in the EU, which is now, of course, the LEC. And Aaron helped me a shit ton early on, because all I do is just bombard him with... He says, hey, if you got any questions, you want any advice, just tell me. I'm like, okay. Bombarding him with questions and saying, can we practice? Can we do this? Like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, which probably got really annoying. And I do apologize for that, Aaron, but, you know, it did help me a lot. And that's how I basically started to improve early on, at least, with the help of Aaron, because he was moving up in the world and someone had to take his place. And he said, you should probably take my place alongside Xscoundrel. And as soon as I started working with Xscoundrel, I needed tips and hints off of Aaron to basically control Xscoundrel in a cast, because he is a very dominant speaker. And that's why now I'm probably a little more dominant than a lot of other play-by-plays, because for that very reason, because Alexandra was so dominant, so I had to be more dominant to make sure that I could get a word in and he wouldn't just ramble for 40 minutes. So that was a fun time, honestly, casting Alexandra. I do kind of miss it at some points. He's doing really well for himself now, which I'm really happy for, and of course Aaron's doing well for himself too. Into casting LEC, and Alexandra, being my casting partner for 2.5 years, basically. Yeah, it must have been 2.5 years. We did League of Legends, like every League of Legends thing in the UK we were doing, like EU Masters and ESL, which was the 2 leagues that you wanted to cast if you were a caster in the UK and you wanted to do League. Those were the 2 leagues that you wanted to cast, and me and Skander were casting there. We also cast alongside people like Frozen Dawn as well, who was a coach for M&M. His name's Will. He's really nice. He's got a completely different job now, nothing to do with esports, but he initially was a coach, then did a bit of casting on the side, and that was really fun. We did 3-person desks sometimes. That was really good. Dares and Trib would pop in every now and then as well, which was really cool. But me and Excoundrel were the casters in the UK that were doing most of these events. And then a mobile game called Vainglory was around for a fairly long time before I was even friends with Excoundrel or Aaron. And in fact, Monte Cristo did cast it too, and so did Semler, I believe. So that was kind of cool. But they ended up getting me on board with the SCMC, the parent company who made Vainglory, and I took over Aaron's job, funnily enough. So it was me and Excoundrel casting Vainglory, which is a 3v3 MOBA, if you've never heard of it. It's now 5v5 after this massive update, but unfortunately did cut a lot of their esports funding after that. Sad to say. I loved, when it was 3v3, I loved the game. It was so much fun. And being on a mobile too, it was obviously a really quick game, so that was kind of fun. And the community is really tight, which is also a very good thing, especially for a game like that. And the esports scene was pretty sick. We flew all over the place. We did the World Finals in Singapore, which me, Excoundrel, and a guy called Dowsy, who's now a Dead by Daylight streamer on Twitch. We ended up doing World Finals, which was pretty sick. But we casted the Vainglory 8, which was like the league for Vainglory, and then we did VIS and VGL, which was the North American and the EU like challenger scene, which was the one below. So you can imagine it like contenders of Vainglory, and the teams would move up. Although they would play some other little tournaments to be put in the VIS and the VGL, and then they'd go up to the Vainglory 8. And that is how I basically got started. I don't want to make this video too long. I just noticed the time. It's already 22 minutes. So we're already on like the first few years of me casting originally. And I guess I'll end it here and make a part 2 a little later on. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I'll see you soon. If you haven't already, links in the description for my Instagram, Twitch, and Twitter if you're not following that already. And subscribe if you're new as well. Thank you, guys. And I guess I'll see you soon.